How do you choose your rod? This sniff test. Shimano, Celis, medium, fast action, 7 foot, 24 ton. Yeah, that's a good drive. Give it the wiggle test. Now, it needs more noodle. Hey everyone, welcome to a new series I am doing. It's for the very introduction fisher, and I'll be doing a couple of these covering different, basically how to get started into fishing. So today we are covering rods. What you need to know about rods. So when you go to like a store like Bass Pro or even Walmart, there's a handful of rods or there's a ton of rods, and why are there so many rods? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. What's the difference between the rods? What you need to know to make a good decision on a rod that you're going to purchase. So one of the first things you need to do, or one of the first things you need to think about, is what kind of reel you're going to want for the rod. There are different rods for different reels. This is a open face or a spinning reel rod. And you see reels underneath. This is how a spinning reel is supposed to sit. So if you see a reel that looks like this, it needs to, when you're fishing with it, you need to have it on the bottom side. Now, there's also a bait caster. This is one of my really old bait casting reels. Now, a bait casting reel, when you fish with it, it sits up. It's on the top. Now, the rod is different, if you notice. The rod has basically like this finger guard, trigger looking thing that sticks out of the bottom. Well, that's going to designate that it's going to have a top reel that sits on top. So what happens is when you grab it, you wrap your fingers around it, and that gives you a better hold. Now, you don't need that on a spinning rod, because the spinning rod, you're already underneath and you have plenty of grip. And usually it's designed to, kind of a hump right here to fit your palm. Works really great. So once you decided that, I guess there is one other. There is the push button, and if you are a very beginner fisher, you're going to want to look for a push button. It sits on top like the bait caster reel. I don't have one here to show you. But a push button, you basically have a button, and you push the button, hold it down, and you cast and let go of the button, and that's how it lets out the line. Then you just crank and it clicks it over, and it's a very simple, basic reel. Great one to start off with if you've never casted a rod before in your life. But if you already know how to cast, kind of got the basics down, I recommend a spinning rod. They're about the easiest to work with. You can do quite a bit of things, and you're going to usually be working with a lot lighter lures, especially when you first start off, because you're going to be wanting to catch fish, or at least more fish, and start honing in your skills. A spinning rod is definitely a good way to go. So once you figure out what reel you want, there is a very important section of the rod you need to look at. So when you're going to decide rods, we're going to look at the section of the rod that's right above the handle. So I've got the reel, and this section right here has a bunch of letters, numbers, words on it. It's going to tell us a little bit about the rod and how they designed it. So on this one, now I grabbed this one because it spells it out real good for you. This is a Lew's rod. And they do a good job of explaining what their rod and reel is. Now, this one says, it's basically its model number right here. That's that WM S5? Or SS, I can't tell. Looks like the top of the S is scraped off. But looks like WMSS 60ML. And you can kind of figure out what those numbers mean by reading the rest of the rod too. But this one has 6 foot 0 inches, which that's the length of the rod. So this is a 6 foot rod. This is a nice little kayak rod. It says power, medium light. So this is kind of the strength of the rod, is a good way to put it. And we'll cover that a little bit more. Now it says line weight, 4 to 10 pound. So that's what the rod is actually designed for, to handle line basically. It's really meant for the 4 to 10 pound test line. Lure weight, or lure WT, that stands for lure weight. That's 1/6 to 1/4 ounce. Now that tells you how heavy of a lure this rod is, designed to handle. And then we have the action, and it says action fast, and so action is basically how the rod bends. So when you're talking action, you're going to look at how this tip bends. So a fast action is going to bend much more in the top part of the rod. A medium action will actually bend more down through the backbone of the rod here. And I guess a soft action or a slow action, I really haven't seen too many of them. My ultralight would probably count as one, but they bend through most of the rod. Now, that becomes important. I'll explain those later. But those are the things you need to look for when you're picking out a rod. What power is kind of one of the most important things. The line weight, the line weight, and the lure weight. Those are the three most important that you need to pay attention to. So this is a medium light rod, and if you're going to start off fishing, and you want something that you can do panfish with, bass with, I could even do trout with this if I really wanted to. This medium lightweight rod with a 4 to 10 pound test range, that's a great rod to start off with. That's what I recommend. Just starters to start off with, because you're going to use little lures, catch quite a bit of fish that way. Then you can, start honing your skills, and then once you get a little more money built up, or you're, decide that you really do want to get into the sport, then you can start branching out to the different sizes. But so when we're talking power, there's usually the three main categories are light, medium, and heavy. Is it heavy? Yeah, light, medium, and heavy power. Now this is my heavy action rod. Now sometimes power and action are used in reverse too. That's what kind of makes it a little difficult. But this one's my heavy. It doesn't actually say heavy on it, which I'm kind of surprised. But I know it's a heavy action rod because of the lure weight. So the lure weight and the power kind of go hand in hand. Now, just to show you, this is my ultralight. So this is my trout rod. Mainly use this for trout, or if I'm going to go for panfish, or if I'm fishing a really tiny stream and I'm not catching any big giant fish, I'll go with this because it's fun. Now this one, just to kind of, this one's backwards. I don't know if I have enough room to show you. Okay, now this one has a totally different way of naming it. Mainly it's all in the serial code, or the model number. It's got a UL, which stands for ultralight, and then it's got the weight of the lures, and it says 1 to 4 pound test. So that's what this one's meant to handle. I actually use 6 pound on it, but actually no, I got 4 pound on here. So I got a couple of reels that I swap in between these just to give me something else. But yeah, this is my 1/32 to 1/8 ounce. So I'm fishing real light lures with this one, and that's what the ultralight action or power stands for. You're going to be using real light gear with an ultralight. So there's kind of a breakdown between the three major ones. So you have light, medium, heavy. A lot of times you'll see a medium heavy, or you'll see a medium light, or you'll see the ultralight. And there may be a few other random ones floating around, but those are the main ones that are actually out there. Now, I'm going to use a heavy rod when I'm fishing really thick cover. So if I have a pond with tons of lily pads on it, I'm going to grab my heavy rod because I can rip the lures through the lily pads with the heavy rod. I'm also going to be throwing heavier lures though, so keep that in mind. So your lure weight is important, your line weight, and your line weight's going to depend on your lure. It's also going to depend on the water clarity, but we'll cover those a little more through another, a special one online, a special lure selection video I'm planning on having, and I'm even going to cover a little bit about reels, just the basics for you. But getting back to the rods, now what about that fast action? So we have the fast, medium action, and basically a slow action, or an ultralight, basically. I think there may be some bigger rods out there that have a slow action, but so the actions are important on what kind of lures you're using. So say I have a crankbait and I'm working off that reaction strike, pulling that lure by them, aggravating the fish, and the fish just kind of out of reaction jerks around and bites that lure. Well, it's quick. They're going to be biting a hard plastic bait, so as soon as they bite it, they're going to know something's wrong with it, so they're going to try to get it out of their mouth quickly. Well, in those cases, you typically want a medium action rod because you want to give your fish more time. Well, you want to be able to set your lure a little longer with the medium action. Fast action, as soon as that fish hits, you're going to try to set the hook because you're setting the hook quick on those. And as soon as you try to set the hook, you're going to put a ton of power into that rod because all the flex is going to be coming just at the tip. So when you have a slower bend through your rod, you actually get longer set times. And that's where it becomes important. So if I'm working with a worm, I can actually work with a fast action rod. And I mainly fish with fast action because I'm fishing streams and stuff. I'm usually fishing worms. But the action is really not as important. And it kind of, the action definitely messes with the feel. A fast action, you'll actually feel more with a fast action, and it's another reason why I use fast action, because I'm working in streams. I kind of need to know the difference between a rock bump and a fish bump. so action is going to be kind of based off of feel. There is some guidelines to go, like I said, but if you're just starting out, really just pay attention to the power, line weight, and the lure weight. And like I said, the best starter rod that I recommend is a medium light. So this is my recommendation for the starter rod. I actually really like the Berkley Lightning Rod. It's been a good rod. It's caught some pretty tough fish and really fast current. This one is my medium light. This has a lure weight of 1/16 through 3/8. Now this says light in the line weight. It says light, 6 to 12 pound. I'm not sure what that light means. It may be referring to like a fast action. That's the first time I've seen medium light and then light on the rod as well. Which I originally started doing this video and I noticed that and I was just like, what does that mean? But anytime I go to the store, I actually grab the rod and play with it to see kind of where it bends, what I'm getting. So I'm not actually usually paying attention to the action that it claims it has, because a lot of times they claim to have something and they're kind of somewhere around there. But it just depends on the lengths they're using. But that should get you kind of started. The one other thing that you probably need to think about is what kind of vehicle you're taking your rods in. Because if you got like a small car and you're trying to throw rods into a small car, probably need to get something that breaks down. Most rods break down at least, or most spinning rods have a section where they break down once, especially in the lower price range. Now when you start getting in the upper price range, you're getting into the professional rods. Most of them guys just throw it on their boats, so they don't have to worry about packing it and stowing it. But if you have to pack it and stow it, something to think about. Now I actually bought this ultralight here. This ultralight I specifically bought because it breaks down into 4 pieces. And it's because I used, when I was in college, I used this as a backpack rod. I would take both my fly rod and my ultralight because when I'm trout fishing, I like to start off with the fly rod, but sometimes it's so much easier to catch them on a spinning rod. So if they're not biting that day real well, I'll switch to the spinning rod just to make sure I get a couple fish in. But so those are the things to think about when you're looking at a rod. Like I said, the power is important. A light power rod. Light power rod's a good one to start with if you're planning to go mainly after panfish, trout. You can get into a little bit of bass, but you're not really going to be chasing the big giant bass. You're not going to be pulling through lily pads with a light action. Medium light is a good all-around rod. Start getting into a medium, it's starting to get pretty heavy, or pretty pretty large lures basically, and you know, your power is at a medium. You're starting to target bass at that point, is a good way to put it. Now when you get into the heavy, you're thinking cover at that point. So like this one, I have it hooked up with a jig that I can throw into real thick wood and bring it through. Or if I have real thick grass, or I have lily pads, I'm going to use my heavy action rod on that. Now, if you have the money, or you're wanting to get a good couple of rods, a good suggestion is, you know, go with a light action rod or a ultra light, jump up to a medium light, and then have something that's a little bit heavier, kind of a medium heavy rod. A medium heavy is a good kind of tail end rod. You can still get it through the lily pads and stuff with that. Just know when you do get a fish, you're going to have a harder time getting them out of those lily pads. That's one thing, the backbone of the heavy rods. When you're in cover, you can pull them through logs and stuff, but you also have to have line and stuff to match it. So that should cover rods for today. Be looking for more. I'll probably cover reels next since I'm doing rods today. Reels, line, those should be coming soon.